All right, welcome back. You're watching Global Today here on Morning Prime. We continue pace with the conversation right now, and we want to focus on what is happening in the country. We are all shocked by what is happening from Kware, with the bodies that are being retrieved of women killed in a very disheartening manner. And questions have been raised regarding who is the person who's perpetrating this. And this is the face of Collins, who apparently the DCI presented him to us, but now he is flying in the face of what he said before. He disowns confession, and he alleges torture as reason for accepting responsibility over killings of their unidentified bodies. And through lawyer John Minor Collins Jumaisi, Kalusha disowned a confession associated with him by the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, adding that he was not in any way involved in the killings, nor did he have any association with one who could have been involved. Appearing before Principal Magistrate Irene Gichobi at Makadara Law Courts, Jumaisi said he was tortured to confess and own up things that are alien to him. And it's the same story that is being carried also in the Daily Nation, who they went to his village in Vihiga County to seek also some of the relatives who might be intimately familiar with Collins, but none seem to be identifying this particular face, right? So is this another cock and bull shaggy dog story from the DCI? They've told us to wait for 21 days so that we may get full information of what is happening from Kware. But why were they really quick off the mark to come up with a suspect, where we have questions regarding other killings in this country that's still the stone they have promised before have not been turned? We'll leave this stone unturned. No stone will be left unturned. That's has been the narrative, isn't it? It was the same for Musando, same for Jacob Juma as well, and many others. But is this story adding up?
Oh, Debal, in line with July, which is I saw our PM speaking on the French Bastille Day, which is, when the revolution occurred in France. And one of the architects of the French Revolution was called Maximilien Robespierre. And, he said you cannot make an omelette without breaking any eggs. To make an omelette, you have to break some eggs. It looks like some eggs were broken in a police station, allegedly. The press is insinuating that. The intelligentsia of this country is just shocked at the amateurish way in which the government is handling all these problems that we have in this country, from the Ford Foundation to the killings at that dump site. The most important thing about a crime scene is to preserve it. That's the number one thing that happens at a crime scene. And there was that crime scene was walked over, was torn apart, there's nothing that was not done to that crime scene. It's been
burning.
Yeah, immediately cordoned it off completely. Asked the coroner to come in, the other day I said that we need to have a coroner in this country, and the PS of Internal Security has now said that we need one. He's actually...
It's long overdue, because we have the act already.
Yes, we have the act already. So we said this last week. We said, the coroner was the first person who's supposed to be there, before even the Director of Criminal Investigation Department comes there. So the crime scene was a mess, Debal. The second thing, Debal, is the suspect, right? It took them a few hours to get a suspect, Debal. Just a few hours. Even the FBI doesn't take a few hours to go and get a suspect that fast. The third thing, Debal, this is just common sense. Any Mwananchi who looks at the chain of events, you don't have to be a lawyer or a criminal investigator to say these things. You just have to have common sense. The suspect was looking at the press when he was taking a mugshot. He just seemed so shocked that he was in the wrong place, at the wrong time, at the wrong moment. You could see his eyes. He just couldn't believe that he was there. Lastly, Debal, that for him now, his lawyers to say that he was forced to confess has just thrown this whole investigation into the gutter. because if you spoil the investigation from point A to point Z, you cannot bring that evidence to court because it's already contaminated. It's already contaminated. The evidence is contaminated. He's contaminated. The crime scene is contaminated. The procedure is contaminated. Debal, I think that we ought to try and do the right thing by this country. And the number one thing that Debal we need to do is you can write the Constitution of Kenya and say that that's an independent institution. But Debal, you know, there is the late President Moi used to say, I called the Minister of Finance and told him to send $100 million to an account. Why did he not say no? Because, you know, the next day he's going to lose his job. So there is this chill over the leadership of the institutions of this country where everybody knows that unless they follow instructions from State House or those ones in charge there, that next day they might lose their job. The bloggers of State House were on Twitter saying it was a cult that did this, even before any police came in. It's on the record. And then when the DCI came and stood in the press conference and said that it was a cult, my alarm bells went crazy. Because if you see the bloggers of State House premeditating the entire discourse of that crime scene, then you know something is wrong. Those people were killed, they were mutilated, they have parents, and I want to send my deepest condolences, first of all, to the families of these people. No human being, at any rate, deserves to die in this way. And I think that the government needs to call an independent international investigation into what is happening in this country. Because the people of this country don't trust the police. The entire population of that area escorted these bodies in police cars all the way to the mortuary because they didn't trust the police to take them there. So Debal, you know, when the people lose confidence, as the way they lose confidence over their government, Debal, the country is in deep problems and we need some leadership, and we need leadership now.
Right, just looking at those pictures on Split there, Dr. Kanenje, everyone is, of course, congratulating the young man for the good job he's doing. But you can see the condition that he's really working under. Just murky waters there, and just for his health as well at the end of the day. But isn't it consternating until now that we've not seen any government officials, the National Disasters Management Authority coming on the crime scene to support even the young man with some gears, some you know, I don't know, some health hazard or hazmat material to try and protect the young man from, I mean, if there are bodies inside there, even psychologically, vicariously, you can be affected by such scenarios. I don't know what you have to say about that. Because I found it that until now, we've not even had, it's not been cordoned off, there's still a crime scene, it's left tomorrow, you can see smoke billowing from that particular crime scene. So you wonder what is really happening. Is someone also really planning the evidence?
First of all, this is not the question of a young man. When the world watches a tragedy like that, and we're having civilians do that, that's the work of our government. We have people who are responsible for doing something like that in terms of retrieving bodies, be able to protect the scenes of the crime, and they're trained to be able to do this work. They have gears to be able to do this work. So someone clearly is sleeping on the job somewhere, and they need to be shown the door, or they need to be visited. You know,
and
it's unfortunate we're actually using our civilians, exposing them to this and to this kind of tragedy. You know, civilians should not be doing this because we have trained people, and our government is not just an average government. We have a lot of resources, a lot of trained people to actually be able to do this. And so it's a shame that we are exposing our citizens, you know, to this kind of thing. There are special instances where you're going to have citizens volunteer to do certain things. But to the extent that this was already known, they would have discovered, this would have been the work of those people who are responsible within our government settings, you know, to be able to do that. Not have civilians actually do this, because we don't look very good, even before the rest of the world. And so when we are trying to seek assistance, whether in crime training, in support investigation, stuff like that, how will they be looking at us when this is the way we handle this scene? Number two, I don't know what is wrong with us generally, because whenever there is a crime like this, we always rush into having a press conference and almost we've concluded everything.
Correct.
You cannot build a case, because if you make a mistake, you cannot go back, you know. Because
you already said it's a pathological serial killer.
Yeah, you understand.
You've characterized the
yes.
guy.
And what we need to do, we need to be measured and develop a communication strategy to citizens to understand what we're trying to do as government. Collect enough evidence that cannot be denied, so that by the time you're going to charge someone for a certain crime, you have foolproof evidence that you're actually going to prosecute them. Number two, what if he has some associates? The moment you reveal too much information, those people are going to find ways of either running away or hiding the evidence that may trace it back to them. What if he was a conduit to actually dump bodies, and perhaps he was not the one who was killing them, or all of them? You see, there is a lot of information we can be able to gather as a result of getting one person perhaps who was involved, instead of putting something out there. Then if, for instance, he denies and he says he was tortured and he confessed under duress, then you realize we can't exactly use that confidence, or rather that evidence in court, because he has disowned it. And so now, if we don't have DNA evidence placing him at the scene of the crime and all those crimes, I can guarantee you, we're going to have to let him walk free, because we're also a law and order country, And so if we don't have evidence, and so I think we've made a mistake in the way we're approaching it. Clearly, there are people who've been involved, and it's a series of killings, and there's a likelihood there are even more that have not been discovered. How about what there's a possibility there could be bodies elsewhere and not just in the other place. So what exactly has been happening? And so for us to rush with this kind of speeches and conclusions without actually being so sure, and then using mechanisms that can be denied before the courts of law, it becomes terrible. And the reason is these young women, most of them, I think young women, not all of them, you see, they're Kenyans. They're young Kenyans, they have families, they come from communities. If the justice is not achieved and we can't get justice for them, there is a way in which that hurts the legitimacy in government and authorities. There's a way in which that can create a sense of resentment among citizens because they no longer feel protected. Remember, our primary function as government is to provide security and safety for citizens. And that is the way we go about it does matter. And just based on what we saw, citizens, going with the police to the morgue and stuff like that, of course, should tell us something that we should approach it in a way, especially at this time in history, where we are having a good degree of social strife and we're trying to put our country back together. If we approach it this way, then it does not inspire the kind of confidence we actually need to move forward.
Thank you. All right, Professor Peter Kagwanja.
Yeah, 4 points. One is that definitely looking at things, Collins, Jumaisi, Harusia is not the killer of these girls.
Correct.
Why?
But how can you be conclusive?
Let me make that. Let me tell you why. This is my opinion.
Yes.
Yeah, this is my opinion, and I'm saying the circumstances under which these girls would get out are that they have been called by somebody, a friend, who seems to be respectable. And when you look at the profile of Harusia, he's not in a position to call anybody for a date. Particularly the kind of girls and the class we're looking at. Seriously, I studied the photo yesterday and could conclude that, you see, it's Mwai Kibaki who once said, I think 1988, that even rigging has some intelligence. So if you really want to frame something in a certain way, you must get the credible person who is capable of calling these girls to lodgings and so on, and they go without asking questions. That's one. Two, of course, the name of this person is confused. You've seen in the papers. that he's supposed to be Sausa or somebody. They call him Kati when he was growing up. You know, that there's confusion about his very identity.
Or whether he lived in that neighborhood.
Or whether he lived in that neighborhood. So there is a lot of there are a lot of crowds around him. Second, there seems to be an attempt here to turn this into a cult. And he doesn't look like a cult leader. From the look of things, he doesn't have the making of a cult leader. But assuming he is, assuming he is,
You've turned out to be Derek, the investigator. For them that grew up on that juice. You remember Derek?
Yeah, that's the point. But assuming he is, then there is the whole question: is he capable of? Does he have the capacity? You know, it's all a question of capacity of this person to pull that number of crowd. 42.
It's impossible.
It is impossible. Now, so what seems to be happening? I think, and I have said this before on this particular forum, our security forces need to adjust the investigations beyond, you know, what is happening, beyond what they have used before. It is not business as usual. Why? In their reports, particularly to Parliament, the NIS has in the past talked about human trafficking and narcotic trafficking as a major threat to Kenyan security. They have indicated that. And I've asked, are we witnessing an addition to that list of transnational crimes, whereby now we are talking about the organ trade or organ trafficking? And that, to me, is the direction we should be looking at. That is where he would come in fittingly, because he would be, his role would just be to dispose those who have been, whose organs have been harvested
elsewhere.
Elsewhere. But your role is how do you get them to be disposed? So maybe that would be his role, if anything. So he might not even know the people he's disposing, or he may not even be the person doing it, but somebody else somewhere doing it. And we say that in regard to Shakahora. And curiously, all these people are in their 20s. The victims are in their 20s. Nobody is interested with Professor Kagwanja's heart or kidney, because it might not give you the mileage you need. You don't buy a dying engine to replace another engine. You get where I'm coming from? So curiously, all these people are girls. Why girls? Because there is a trua. Particularly if they are not married and they are prospective and they want people who would provide for them. And
you can prevail upon them as well.
And you can also prevail upon them because they are physically they are weaker.
But what about if someone made it look like that?
What?
That it was organ harvesting and in fact it was not.
No, that's what we are saying. Why I'm pushing this line as a possible way of investigating. Talking about a possible way of investigating is simply because the organ trade globally is one of the growing frontiers of trade. We know it is now at $1.7 billion, dollars, and 10% of it is criminal. It's illegal. In other words, it is based on criminality. And this has much to do with the expansion of diseases like kidney-related disease, heart-related diseases, and diabetes and so on. So in short, there is that line one can investigate. And we said this in regard to a similar case of girls here. I think it's early this year, where a number of girls were also killed. By that time, there was no Gen Z revolts and so on. So I can see there is an attempt to link this to the Gen Z revolt, and these might be people who were killed and dumped there by the government or whatever. I mean, we need to look at this as an independent case, beyond the current framing of our own revolutionary times. The truth is, Kenya is in the vortex of transnational crimes. Our girls victims of transnational crimes.
Indeed, and of course, looking at also Tanzania, they're raising alarm because I saw one of the dailies that they are asking, as children are going back to school, I think we didn't put it in our dailies, as children are going back to school, then the parents and teachers should be alert because of the disappearances of the children as well. So it is the young men and women and also children who are disappearing as well. It's a niggling worrying in Tanzania. Let me just rope in Professor.
You can also add the Shakahora, which we want now to bury behind us. It was about children.
Well, we cannot bury behind it because we don't even have any reports given.
Nothing has happened.
We've seen the Ministry of National, the Ministry of Internal Security saying now they need to expand to the expansive, of course, ranch. What is it called? That particular ranch itself, to 37,000 acres more. That they suspect there could be even more bodies. Wow. So it is just, and now they need to do it, I think, not with the way they've been exhuming bodies, but now with forensic flights, maybe to try and do an aerial survey of that particular area. So it could be something that is, it will take a while.
Yeah.
I know you've not spoken for the longest while. I should have started with you when we began from a short break, but forgive me.
It's good to listen to wisdom.
It's good to listen to wisdom. Thank you.
I think somebody bungled everything here.
Somebody bungled everything.
Yeah, everything. It looks like a diversion from something.
Yes.
And the diversion itself was bungled. And so what is coming out is all wrong. Now, the Kenyan intelligence system is reputed to be very good.
Yes.
And it is very good.
It is true.
And so somebody somewhere knows what happened here. In the same way that somebody somewhere knew about Shakahora.
Yeah.
The details of it, somebody's they have somewhere. But as it's usually noted, the people who collect intelligence, which is their job, are not the ones who use that intelligence. Their job is to collect and give it to
someone else.
Somebody, the policy maker, to do something about it. Now, if the policy maker has problems or has no capacity to understand what is being presented, nothing happens. Or if the policy maker has capacity to understand and may be party to whatever, you still know that nothing is going to happen there. So somebody somewhere knows. And the young man who has been paraded there, I think it looks suspicious about him. If something doesn't add up, and because it doesn't add up, then somebody need to go back to the drawing board. If the attempt was to divert from the Gen Z, it's not working very well.
It's not working.
It's not working. But whatever the case is, and you have a police station just next there, and how more than 40 bodies get passed by the police station, something is wrong. And as has been pointed out, assuming that the news was news even to the police or to the government, assuming it was news to the government, then the reaction was wrong. Because that young man, or well, I don't know how young he is, who was going down the rope to get the bodies, and if he is part of the system, you never know. You never know. But if he's not, he's a hero. So he should be a candidate for one of those medals. Because the system failed. And in fact, there should be why did the system fail to deal with such a thing? And why did it's okay for him to retrieve one body. Okay? But after that, the system should have been there to help him, to help do the work. So that's why I'm saying that everything was bungled from the beginning by whoever is supposed to be in charge, which means that the Ministry of Interior, because this is largely an interior thing, needs to account for this thing. One way or the other, find out where the mistake was and who is responsible, and then come clean on what's going on. I think there's something here they should come clean on right now. What happened yesterday with the Gen Zs, the demonstrations. You know, there was a smoke that looked pinkish. And there is something running around, people wondering what kind of thing is that.
Yeah.
I think somebody, the Inspector General.
We will come back. We'll come
let
back
me finish. Let me finish that line of thought. Because it's a very serious allegation. The Inspector General needs to come out clearly and explain what that was, so that people stop speculating.
Was that really confirmed? That because
there is a rumor that it was this or that, we don't know, but there was something pinkish.
Well, the number one, I just want to tell, we have a new police commissioner, in fact, or an acting one, Mr. Kanja.
Inspector General.
Inspector General, I mean. And I was hopeful yesterday when I saw a circular that he sent to the protesters saying that the police are going to try to make sure that there will be no problems between the protesters and the police. Of course, what happened subsequently is a totally different matter. The question is, Debal, at the heart of this whole problem is that the popular national imagination is that the police or sections of the police or the security forces in this country went to Githurai and did something called extrajudicial killings. That's in the popular imagination today in our country. Now, the government, the most important thing about a government, Debal, is how it speaks. If the government doesn't know how to speak, then the government reinforces these feelings, correct, right, or wrong, that something is afoot. Debal, the common sense is that up to today, that crime scene has not been secured. As we speak, what they did is they just dragged the bodies out of there and took it to the mortuary. Now, I put it to you, Debal, that there's a fish in the water in this matter. And the police commissioner, the inspector general, has to come out, and the DCI, and give detailed explanations as to what is going on in these crimes. And as my learned senior has said, is that the bungling of the game of this process and the subsequent bungling of the same is clear for all Kenyans to see. And given the context of this fight between the police and the protesters of General Z, I think this is more kerosene onto the fire. And we have to be very, very, very careful, because already the anger levels in this country have hit the roof. And if we add this to the package, there could be a popular explosion, Debal, among the population of this country. Lastly, Debal, sometimes when the police or the security system are in disrepute, it is just common sense for the government to call something independent to come in and intervene to tell us what they should do. I think that I want to say to the Permanent Secretary, Minister of Internal Security, that the fact that he's done this, it's late, but he has done this coroner thing, as we suggested here last week. I think that's a step in the right direction. There has to be a completely new way of dealing with these issues of crime and punishment, Debal, in this country. Otherwise, the rule of law is going to break down completely.
Right, and of course, the president, I think he's on it, looking at indications yesterday that there will be the formation of the National Corona Council, headed by the Corona General himself, who will ideally have been the person now to come and take charge of what is happening in the Kware right now, to cordon off, and if maybe people are still dumping garbage there, that should be stopped, and alternative given direction. And so we're eagerly waiting for it to happen. But there was a matter that was actually making the National Coroner's Act not to be implemented, because as it's being purported from that particular act, this has to be within the jurisdiction of the Cabinet Secretary of Justice, which we see from the previous government. We've not had such a docket. We wonder maybe with the constitution or the appointment of a new cabinet, we'll have an office of cabinet that is overseeing the Ministry of Justice, or that will have a Ministry of Justice at the end of the day. You wanted to say something, Professor?
No, I was just wondering whether the other quarries.
All the other quarries that will emerge, you never know. Unless we'll get another epiphany, like we did with Paris, right? The metaphysical act of the other world that came and say, you know, their body's in the quarry, my body's in the quarry, I want to be buried at home. Yeah, maybe we'll have, if it hadn't taken that, I don't know if you take that to be a very spooky story, but are you doubtful? But at least it led to this at the end of the day.
Yeah, I may have to consult my brother, Professor Gagwanja, with the oracle teller.
That's a new trade.
Of course, we know Professor is an elder somewhere. Yeah, where he always chants sometimes here and there.
You are also an elder in your own church. So don't try.
I'm not an elder anywhere. I certainly deny.
And this act, the person I coronated as a senior elder, Moturi. So that's very sad.
Yeah, I think
he was fired.
What that also, I think says is we don't exactly manage our quarries or the remains of our quarries, very well. And what we know is those type of places provide opportunity for people to commit crime in the hope that they can get away with it. It's not just these gentlemen, who have been brought before us, but people who are committing some small crimes. People kill family members, they kill their rivals, they kill their enemies, and they find it very easy to dispose of the bodies when such places exist outside probably potential accidents that may happen. And so we actually need to be able to be filling up. We can turn our quarries into very well done dump sites from which we can generate electricity, much like what countries in the advanced economies do, using trash to actually generate electricity. So instead of just leaving them to become potential havens for dumping, persons who are victims of crime, we should investigate and make sure other dump sites and quarries actually do not have the same issue that we are seeing today. And so I think it's also a wake-up call for our country.
All right. We have also the United Nations who have spoken on this particular demonstrations in the country. Let's just listen into what they had to say yesterday. Get it, we'll just play it for you momentarily. And of course, concerned about the protests that are ongoing in the country and the police brutality that is ongoing. We want to come to the issue of the statement that has been made by the president, picking out on Ford Foundation. And Ford Foundation also has come out strongly denying that they have been heavily involved in these demonstrations. They stand for the rule of law at the end of the day. Let's just begin from there, because we have questions that we had the deputy president alleging that the NIS was a pointing finger at him. We've had the government spokesman raising the same issue that we have Russia involved in this. And now we have the Ford Foundation, which is pointing to America, where also the president has cozy relations with them. Ahmed Hashim.
The president was invited by Joe Biden to the White House, and he was made a non-NATO ally. He nearly even addressed Congress. I think Congress refused. And then the president is now telling us that the same American system which invited him to Washington and made him a non-NATO ally sent the Ford Foundation back to Nairobi on the plane that was going back with loads of US dollars to give Boniface Mwangi and Khalid and these activists here in Kenya to overthrow his government. And you can see, Debal, that the president was seething with anger when he was saying that. By the way, Debal, when he was saying that in Kericho, the Chief Justice, the President of the Supreme Court of this country, was meeting with the chairman of the Ford Foundation at the judiciary. Is the government, Debal, helter-skelter today? Or is it a mad hatter? Debal, I put it to you that there is a war going on inside government itself. Because if the judiciary was welcoming the Ford Foundation and the president was condemning it, it just means that there's cross currents in the government and nobody's talking to each other. You know, the government spokesman, you know, if the government had any kind of chutzpah, they would release that fellow from that job because he is the worst enemy they have. This is the man who said that the Russians are in town funding the demonstrations. Debal, the government is playing footsie with our lives and the people of this country. And I think the president is the person who is doing this. There is this whole discourse in Kenya, or narrative, in which, you know, because of the dictatorship that we come from, so it's not President Kenyatta the first, it's Bio Koinange who's doing this. It's not him. It's not Moi, it's Biwott who's doing this. It's not Kibaki, it's someone else who's doing it. It is President Ruto who's doing it. Well, he's the guy in charge there. And he doesn't listen to anyone. And he says things the way he feels that he says it because he believes in his own hype. You have seen the president speak, Debal. He practices on the mirror on how to lift his hand and how to speak. The inauthenticity, Debal, of his speeches is just shocking. But Debal, let me just finish. The second thing is, Debal, what he's saying, Debal, is obnoxious. It's totally obnoxious. That man should be more empathic about what's going on in this country. He should be visiting the funerals. He should be reining in the security forces and saying, this is not the time to shoot our citizens. 4 of them were killed in town the other day. This law and order rhetoric, Debal, is from the far right thinking that has taken over this country. It is not right for us to exercise our constitutional right to demonstrate in this country and the police to use live bullets in town. And adding that there is foreign influence in this demonstration, Debal, is the creativity or the absurdity of trying to take away the organic